Mishpatim, rulings. Shemot, Exodus, 21:1 to 24:18. Haftarah, Yirmeyahu, Jeremiah, 34:8 to 22 and 33:25 to 26. Berit Hadashah, suggested Mattityahu, Matthew 5:38 to 42, and Messianic Jews, Hebrews 10:28 to 39. Vele hamishpatim asher tasim lifnechem. These are the rulings you are to present to them. Introduction. Mishpatim expands on the initial commandments given at Sinai. Torah really means instructions, and Mishpatim means rulings, which begs the question, did the rulings come through Moshe, or those Moshe appointed to rule on how to apply those instructions? Either way, they originated from Adonai, and how they are applied today is up to Adonai. In the introduction to Shemot, Exodus, in the complete Jewish Bible, 3 pillars to Jewish life are identified as the people of Israel, the land of Israel, and keeping the instructions of the Torah with love and passion. Introduction, page 70, Complete Jewish Bible Study Version. The initial ruling includes slavery, which needs to be understood in context. This is difficult for us in the United States, where it is difficult to separate from the years of slavery in this country. While it is fair to understand that Israel was enslaved against their will and abused, it is also fair to identify this as having occurred to Africans forced to come to this country where they were abused. There is no literal exodus in this country, but there was a long journey through time that continues today, and from which many are still affected. Black America has struggled against the continued emotional effort to subjugate them. This parsha also discussed the struggle for women for equality. In this country, before the abduction of Africans, there were servants called indentured servants. It is interesting to note that this was similar to the rulings regarding servants, slaves, in this part of Torah. The National Park Service educates on this where it says about slavery that non-convict indentured servants served terms of 4 to 6 years, while convicts had to serve at least 7 years. The Torah also separates a different term of service for those judged for a crime versus those who trade work for something of value, such as transportation to this country. The Torah does not allow forced servitude. Those who try to use Scripture to validate slavery are taking the words out of context and attempting to justify a crime against humanity. The Torah says, if you purchase a Hebrew slave, he is to work 6 years, but in the 7th, he is to be given his freedom without having to pay anything. Complete Jewish Bible, Exodus 21:2. While it allows someone to choose to continue to serve, in 50 years they are to be set free anyway. As it says in Leviticus, a slave will go free in the year of Yovel, Jubilee, 50th year. He and his children with him. He will go free in the year of Yovel, and he and his children with him. Leviticus 25:54, Complete Jewish Bible. Because women were treated as property with rules, There is a difficult portion of this parsha that begs explanation. It says, if a man sells his daughter as a slave, she is not to go free like the men slaves. If her master married her, but decides she no longer pleases him, then he is to allow her to be redeemed. He is not allowed to sell her to a foreign people because he has treated her unfairly. If he has her marry his son, in other words, not him, then he is to treat her like a daughter. If he marries another wife, he is not to reduce her food, clothing, or marital rights. If he fails to provide her with these three things, she is to be given her freedom without having to pay anything. It is important to note these three are the minimum obligations of a husband to his wife: food, clothing, conjugal rights. These conditions were part of every Jewish marriage contract. The bride would carefully protect the document because if these conditions were not met, this was her ticket to freedom. So, in all likelihood, this portion was referring to a non-marriage arrangement in which the person was taking on an additional non-betrothed woman with conjugal relations. Haftarah. In the Haftarah it says, this word came to Yirmeyahu from Adonai after King Mattityahu had made a covenant with all the people in Jerusalem to emancipate them. Everyone who had a male or female slave who was Hebrew was to let him go free. None was to keep as a slave a fellow Jew. This rule from Adonai repeats rejection of slavery. This time our chosen brothers and sisters did as Pharaoh. When they let them go, then changed their minds and took them back. Adonai responded, you did not heed me and proclaim freedom each to his brother and each to his neighbor. So now I proclaim for you a freedom, says Adonai, for sword, plague, and famine. I will make you an object of horror to all of the kingdoms on earth. This message against slavery or forced labor was repeated in the Haftarah. Despite the consequences of Israel's actions, Adonai also, in the previous chapter, kept his promise of redemption and forgiveness, where he said, if I have not established my covenant with day and night and fixed the laws for sky and earth, an oath, then I will also reject the descendants of Yaakov and of my servant David, not choosing from his descendants people to rule over the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. For I will cause their captives to come back, and I will show them compassion. As always, there is compassion, forgiveness, and redemption. It is interesting that this portion ends with scripture that occurs before the latter part, where the sin is identified. It is easy to accept that those who chose this parsha order were influenced by Adonai. It is also important to note the significance of the covenant with Moshe. Brit Hadashah. From Mattityahu we hear from Messiah Yeshua, you have heard that our fathers were told, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you not to stand up against someone who does you wrong. On the contrary, if someone hits you on the right cheek, let him hit you on the left cheek too. The Messiah Yeshua taught forgiveness and redemption, a reflection of the message of Adonai in the Torah. In Messianic Jews, Hebrews, we hear from an anonymous author who writes from a Jewish perspective that is more traditional. The author of Messianic Jews, Hebrews, says this about the covenant responsibilities, saying, Someone who disregards the Torah of Moshe is put to death without mercy on the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. Think how much worse will be the punishment deserved by someone who has trampled underfoot the Son of God, who has treated as something common the blood of the covenant which made him holy, and who has insulted the Spirit, giver of God's grace. For the one we know is the one who said, "Vengeance is my responsibility, I will repay." For the forgiveness we need and redemption, we must do to others the same. Conclusions. As always, in Torah, Adonai promotes loving behavior and righteous actions while also showing compassion and redeeming actions toward even those who do not deserve it. Messiah Yeshua also models this to all who would follow him. Have a good week and a Shabbat Shalom.